we don't have a strategic plan. Or number two, we have a strategic plan, but we really don't use it on a consistent basis. Or number three, we have a plan and it guides our actions and our decisions on a regular basis. Or number four, maybe something else. So take this moment to add your chat comments. All right, so it looks like we have number three. Excellent, Laura. Another number three, Anne. A number two from Joanna. Number two from Victoria. All right, excellent. So it gives me a sense, so most everybody has a strategic plan. It sounds like it's really about how well are you using it. And it's actually surprisingly common for organizations to not have a strategic plan in place, or at least not to have one that's up to date, that they use on a real regular active basis. And this is despite the fact that a lot of foundations in particular insist that you have them. I've gotten a lot of calls recently from organizations and something from the outside, whether it be the giving partner, the giving challenge has prompted them to proceed with strategic planning, or maybe something internally, reorganization, restructuring of programs might prompt strategic planning. So there are many reasons why an organization might embark on that. So here's some reasons why organizations avoid strategic planning. So this is the dreaded setting the shelf on the plans, if anybody can relate to that. Lots of meetings, lots of discussion, and then nothing ever happens. So that's an unfortunate waste of time and everyone's money. So a great strategic planning process should actually help the organization clarify its direction, align their team and resources. It should be an active, living, breathing document. You're basically saying these are the most important things that we need to focus our time, attention, and resources on in the next few years. So it should absolutely be guiding our staff meetings, our board meetings, all of our committee meetings, and our committee work as well. A lesson that I've learned over the years, my 20 years of working with nonprofits and doing planning, is when I work with a strategic planning task force, a small committee of board and staff, usually no more than about 6 to 8 people, the organization is much more likely to be successful in the implementation and execution of the plan than if I'm just working with the CEO, for example, because it really, you need champions, not only of the process, but also of the plan. And it creates greater accountability all the way around. How about this one? Can anybody relate to this one? There's a lot going on in this image. It says, we are rebuilding the plane while trying to fly it. We all have the pieces. So you got your pilot over here. You got maybe your CEO here walking the plane. This guy over here, poor thing, he's got some serious issues. So this really, it's sometimes hard to plan the future, especially when we're in an uncertain time like we are now, but you're also operating and managing the day-to-day of doing your mission work and trying to keep the plane in flight. So we know that most nonprofit staff and board work hard, but working hard is not a guarantee of making a real difference. So busyness, constant activity can sometimes mask a lack of direction, I found in my experience. So, and also operating in constant crisis mode can really burn people out. So organizational effectiveness depends on operating with a common understanding about what's important as the whole, that the whole organization needs to accomplish. Simone had mentioned working in silos versus a systems thinking. Part of strategic planning is really looking at the whole, and how the whole can be greater than the sum of the parts. Here's another common issue I see. He says here, 10 minutes left, let's do the strategy. So does that sound familiar to anyone? Not setting enough time aside to plan properly. It's sort of like that ready, shoot, aim. Or I've heard development people or volunteers say, why can't we just skip the planning part? We know what we need to do, get out there and raise money. But the plan, if it's done well, will help you be more effective and accomplish greater results. It will also help you figure out what strategies are working, because we're collecting metrics and data on our performance and tracking that and course correcting as needed. Here's another common scenario. Enough with all the strategic planning, get out there and kill something. Are any of you overthinkers, or you work in an organization of overthinkers that maybe lack decisiveness? Oftentimes there's lots of thinking, we're operating above our shoulders so much, we're discussing, but there's a lack of action and follow through and implementation and accountability. I always say ideas are easy, but execution is everything. And the final one, these aren't our real numbers, but darn it, they're the numbers we deserve. So this is what I call the wishful thinking. Strategic planning must be grounded in reality, objectivity, and honesty for it to be a useful management and leadership tool. And I would also say it's a philanthropic tool, but it's an underutilized tool with your organization. And so my hope today is to help you understand how you can better optimize not only a strategic planning process, and just planning in general, strategic thinking, and how you can optimize the actual plan itself to engage and build community around your cause. So again, welcome. Please use the chat box for questions. We will have some Q&A. And what I hope to accomplish in the next 30 minutes or so is to give you sort of an overview so everybody has sort of a common understanding and foundation around strategic planning. What does it entail? Who, what, when, where, how? And then, of course, woven throughout there, and then we'll recap at the end, is really how to leverage the process and the plan to improve major and plan giving results. And I'm relying on Amy to let me know and intervene if there's something that needs to be adjusted or if there's a pressing question. So just real quickly, I want to let you know where I'm coming from. So what I'm going to be presenting is strategic planning according to Christi. And my experience is really grounded in human and organizational behavior with psychology, leading nonprofits from both a staff and board positions, and working closely with donors through my foundation work. I've invested a lot of time in the body of knowledge, as Simone says, and really continuing to get certifications so I can be a better instrument, a better resource to the nonprofits that I help, because I believe that I am a partner in transformation with organizations. So this is a little bit about me. So what is strategic planning? So planning really helps assure that an organization remains relevant and responsive to the needs of its community. Because we are a public charity, we really have to be mindful of the community and our relevance. Yeah. So strategic planning is an orderly and systematic approach to deciding really the foundational strategic direction of the organization. That's our purpose, the vision for the future, our core values, the major goals and strategies that we'll relentlessly pursue to accomplish 1, 2, and 3. And of course, it's within a set period of time, typically 3 to 5 years. It really should provide the basis for monitoring progress. Now, I always say that philanthropy is not about money. Philanthropy is about impact. What is the impact that you're making? How do we know we're making that impact? How are we monitoring our progress towards mission accomplishment? And how is that part of our strategic planning process? How are we engaging the board and staff in those really robust catalytic conversations and questions about where are we going? What is our big dream? What's that audacious vision for the future? It really should generate energy and enthusiasm for moving forward. Does it inspire action? I would say about 80% of the organizations that I work with in strategic planning, their mission statement usually is adjusted only slightly. Usually it's trying to make the language more concise, to explain what business that you're in, to make it more brief and inspiring and memorable. One of the greatest mission statements is Girls Inc. And it's memorable, it's easy to remember, inspire all girls to be strong, smart, and bold. It makes you want to say, tell me more. So that's what your mission statement should say. And it should be concise. We often say it should fit on a coffee mug or a t-shirt. What I find most of the time, organizations try to fit so much in their mission statement when it could really be bottom lined to something much more simple and straightforward, but leaves people saying, well, tell me more, I'm interested, you've piqued my interest. The other part of the process, because this is fundamental to any strategic direction, is your vision for the future. Many organizations don't actually have a vision statement or some type of idea of what are they working towards? You know, what's that audacious goal for the future? What is the difference we want to make if we're successful in accomplishing our mission? Martin Luther King Jr. has his I Have a Dream speech is a great example of a vision, something to aspire to. And having a vision statement makes it easier to focus all the organization's efforts in the same direction. So everybody's rowing in the same direction. You don't have these board members that are out here saying, well, what about this? What about this? It's not our vision. This is our focus. And then our values, when we animate our values and bring them to life for the organization, they guide action, they clarify who we are, they articulate what we stand for. And we know that donors align with organizations that represent their values. So, you know, how are you optimizing your mission and your vision and your values to build community around your cause, to engage people in your work? And we're going to talk more about the strategic goals and strategies, but first I want to get your input. So we'll use the chat again, the chat box. What is one strategic question our organization must answer in the coming year? So what is that question? And I'll be Alex Trebek. Please put your response in the form of a question. All right, we're not having any responses. Okay. What is the best way to stay connected and engage? Great question. Stay connected to donors and beneficiaries and engage them. What other questions must your organization answer in the next year? Another way to think of this are, what are the issues we must confront in order to serve our mission in the years ahead? How are we meeting the needs of clients? Great question. What does the post-COVID era look like in terms of food insecurity? Excellent, very catalytic. These are great ways to engage. These kinds of questions are a great way to engage your board, engage your staff, engage your stakeholders, and real meaningful idea generation, as well as moving from idea generation to real solutions that people will buy into. You know, the saying, don't do anything about me without me. When we get people's input, they're much more committed to helping us realize that dream or realize the potential of what it means. You remember the saying, if you want money, ask for advice. If you want advice, ask for money. So strategic planning is really about asking a lot of questions. What is our impact? Great question. All right, so I'm going to do a follow-up question for you all, and please continue to use the chat box. So who or what will be impacted if we fail to act on whatever the answer is to this question? What are the consequences if we do nothing, if we fail to act? Okay, so families and seniors won't have access to vital nutrition. The organization may close its doors or lose programs. That's a great catalytic question. So if we had to close our doors, who else in the community would be able to serve the beneficiaries of our programs? Or is someone else better suited to serve our beneficiaries with certain programs? Sometimes we have to, through the process, we have to evaluate the effectiveness of our programs and our services and cycle some programs out, or maybe scale programs up, scale them back, maybe find a new home for programs if it's a better fit. You know, through strategic planning, it's really an opportunity to take a long-term but also a short-term look at our operations and how we operationalize our mission through our programs. Because the greatest measure of an organization, nonprofit organization's success is its impact. And we make our impact through our programs. But we also know that philanthropy makes that impact possible. So philanthropy has to be a top priority on everyone's mind within the organization. You know, I often use the quote that Simone shared about culture eats philanthropy, or excuse me, culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that's absolutely true. I've found it many times over that if you don't have a culture of philanthropy within your organization, it sometimes feels like you're on an uphill battle or on a treadmill or running circles as a development professional, because everybody doesn't get it and understand the absolute and critical importance of philanthropy and the role that it plays in making impact possible. And it's our job to make sure that we're educating them. And through strategic planning is a great opportunity to elevate that awareness and help people understand that, you know, philanthropy is critical to making impact. So why strategic planning? I'm just going to go through these quickly. I'm going to put them all up here and see what else ideas you have. Again, it goes all about to relevance. That's why it's so important that a nonprofit create a strategic planning process that is inclusive, that includes a variety of different perspectives, both inside of the organization, internal stakeholders, and outside the organization, external stakeholders, and also an understanding of the environment and the context in which the organization is operating. How is our community changing and evolving? What's that data that tells the story of the evolution of our community? What are the gaps? What are the needs? You know, being responsive to the needs of the community is absolutely critical to having a successful plan and planning process. I actually worked with an organization that ended up dissolving. They had reached out to me many years ago for strategic planning, but they had lost touch with the changing needs of the special population that they worked with. and they hadn't evolved with the changing times and changing technology. About 45 days into the strategic planning process, I had been asking a lot of questions. The executive director announced her retirement to the surprise of the board. So I think I rattled some cages there, and it sometimes happened, but it was necessary. Ultimately, the board decided to dissolve because what they found through the community assessment process is that those that they had served in the past had found other places to get services. So really, to be good stewards of the community's resources, the board decided to close the organization and distribute its asset to some of those other entities. Establish clarity and recommit to the mission and vision. In my experience, strategic planning process can be, and usually is, very energizing for groups. You know, having somebody from the outside coming in and asking these catalytic questions that really take you somewhere, and taking the time to step back from the day-to-day to really think about what's possible and what excites you about those possibilities really energizes and inspires not only staff, but board and donors. So it's a great opportunity to recommit to the mission of the organization and get greater clarity on your business and your focus. Which leads to the next one. It helps the board and staff focus on vision-driven strategic priorities and measurable results. So do you ever have board members that feel like they have these sacred cows or these ideas of things that the organization should do? As Simone says, we don't need any more ideas. Well, the strategic plan really helps everybody be on the same page and rowing in the same direction if it's optimized. You know, just going through the process and rubber stamping a plan isn't what I'm talking about here. I'm really talking about committing and focusing in a laser way to our strategic priorities. You know, if we're saying yes to these things, then we're going to say no to some of these other things that come up, because we're saying these are the most important things that are going to help us achieve more mission. Creating alignment between the board and the staff, again, everybody being on the same page. It also improves decision making. You know, if we know that these are our priorities, it really helps eliminate some of the unnecessary.
And so they're just doing it at the end when you select.
Okay, I think we have some overlap talking. Apologize for that. Garner support, improving communication and garnering support. So getting your strategic plan, getting input from your major donors into your strategic plan through the process is a great way to get investment. Involvement invites investment. So involving them in some way in the process, whether it be through listening sessions, surveys, interviews, because you really can use that process to deepen and strengthen the relationships that you have with donors, foundations. I know I often am speaking and interviewing foundation leaders because they have such a broad perspective of the community and also have personal experience working with your organization. And there's no shortage of opinions there. So, and usually they're very honest and open with me about their perspectives. But it also says a lot when you're saying you're important enough to this organization that we want your input into planning their future. And then also with the garnering support, we know that donors like to bridge gaps. They want dreams to be realized. They want to invest in that impact. And if you're using your strategic plan well, it's going to be telling your story, both past, present, and future. And it can be a great tool to get buy-in and support to build community around this future vision. It also supports the development of the right fundraising strategy. I love what Simone said, and I'm going to start to incorporate that your fundraising plan should be presented at the same time that your budget is being presented as well. Your fundraising plan should stem from your strategic plan. So for example, if in your strategic plan, you're going to embark on a capital campaign, that's going to change your fundraising strategy for the next year. So it's an opportunity to be thoughtful about planning, tying your plans together, making sure that they're aligned. And then it also promotes learning and change. My background in nonprofit capacity building has shaped me in such a significant way that when I work with organizations and work with boards, I do a lot of work in re-engineering governance and partnering with board leadership, is to incorporate learning and education about best practices. And I use a number of tools to help in that process. But strategic planning is really about learning and change. Otherwise, we wouldn't call it a strategic plan, we would call it a status quo plan. Because we're really talking about what are the changes we need to make in order to be even more effective, be even more impactful. All right, so here's your chance again for involvement. Is what else? What other value have you found in strategic planning? If you want to add that to the chat box. Are any of these listed here that you'd like even more elaboration on? Finding out what makes a constituent tick. Excellent. Yeah, I love that Simone was mentioning philanthropic stories. Storytelling is so powerful for an organization, and the organizations that I see that are truly successful in building donor loyalty really understand the power of stories and how they use stories to tell their impact and to engage. We all respond to stories. It's in our DNA, storytelling. Excellent. Okay, so something that helps organizations and staff say no, yes, saying no, yes, we all need to practice that more. It's given us specific direction during COVID. Yes, so a lot of scenario planning has happened during COVID. If this happens, then we'll do this. If this happens, then this. So scenario planning is a great tool during crisis situations. Safe mechanism to keep the conversation anchored on agreed upon direction. Excellence can help you form partnerships with other agencies. Absolutely. Always our visions are so big that it's going to take a community to really make them realize. And thinking about who can be our partners in this work. Absolutely, our donors are our partners, our staff are our partners, but what other agencies can be partners in this vision, this dream that we have for our community, and bringing them into the fold and figuring out how we can work collaboratively together to really achieve this impact, because you can't do it on your own. You really need a community and to build community around your cause. And that definition of community is broad. All right, great input, everyone. So let's talk about, are we ready? So I won't spend a lot of time on this because I know many of you have already gone through the process, but when you've gone through one strategic planning process, you've gone through one strategic planning process, because it depends on who you're working with and how you do it. But bottom line, a strong strategic plan requires time, energy, and thought. And it's important to determine an organization's readiness. I've turned down organizations that have reached out to me to facilitate their strategic planning because they really just weren't ready. But I help them say, if you do these things, it'll help you get to a better place. Organizational stability is one of them. An organization reached out to me last year that was going to be having a leadership transition. Their CEO was retiring in about 4 months, and they were going to be starting the search process, and the board wanted to start strategic planning. I was like, whoa, now is not the time. You need to wait until the new CEO is in their position and has an opportunity to get their feet under them, and that so they can be an active participant and partner in the strategic planning process. And I'm glad that they agreed to do that, to wait. There are many destabilizing events. COVID has been destabilizing, although right now I feel like organizations have stabilized and they're starting to do more planning and beyond short-term planning, looking more longer term. So is the organization stable? Is there a transition happening? Is one of my first questions. Do you have an existing plan? You know, how well did you follow it? Have you achieved your goals yet? Sometimes goals may take more than 3 years, and it may be a continuing goal and it may evolve. You know, how did your strategies work? Did you course correct? Did you really optimize the plan? If not, how can we incorporate into a new planning process some of the weaknesses that you experienced the last time? Having the time, we know how busy everyone is. And as I mentioned before, sometimes we think busyness and lots of activity means that we're having an impact. But sometimes it's because we don't know when to say no to different things because we have a lack of direction. So being able to invest the time, typically it's a 4 to 9 month process, the process that I guide organizations through. It's this sort of go slow to go fast philosophy. You know, the other questions is this the right time? Is there a rush? I've gotten calls. We want to do one board retreat. We can only dedicate 3 hours and we want to have a strategic plan at the end. Well, that's not realistic. And I don't want to be part of something that's not going to be successful. And I want to set you up for success. So it does take time. It's an investment that you're making over a period of time to do the planning, but it's also an investment in your organization over a longer period of time, typically 3 to 5 years. So we want to make sure that we set ourselves up for success and do this right. Funding. So are we willing to invest the resources to do it well? Not only time, but also money. It should be an important investment that you make in the organization's capacity and the organization's sustainability, as well as the organization's stability. Commitment of board and staff. So everybody needs to be on board, so to speak, with the planning, not only the process, but also actually having a strategic plan and using it, making it the priority that it is, and using the plan to guide us in our decision making as well. So having commitment and buy-in. Facilitator, so who's going to lead the process? Is the organization willing to be challenged? Are you willing to sort of show your vulnerable underbelly, so to speak, to say we need to have honest and real conversations about where our shortcomings are, as well as acknowledging our strengths and where there are some capacity needs that we're going to grow. Is your organization, does it have experience working with a consultant, with a facilitator to help guide the process? I find that having that neutral outside person can make all the difference. The key roles in strategic planning. So we have the board. The board's role, I think their number one role is to set the direction of the organization. And that's typically done through a strategic planning process. So really, they need to be the ones to be the impetus. It doesn't usually always happen that way. It sometimes comes from the staff, but the board should really say, we need to set the strategic direction. We must agree on a plan. We must invest the resources. Certainly, we want to make sure that we have their input and buy-in earlier in the process, and then throughout the process as well. They need to be active participants in the planning. And of course, they have to approve the final plan. So you want their buy-in. I like to work with a strategic planning task force. They are really the champions not only of the process, but also of the final plan. I work closely with these both board and staff members. Usually it's about 6 to 8 people. It's a small, nimble group. But they really guide the way. I work with them more closely. They do a lot of the heavy lifting in the planning process. And they're also responsible for ensuring the work gets done. So it's that accountability piece that's built in. And we want that task force to be comprised of both visionaries as well as actionaries. And it's important that task force members are respected by the board. The chief executive's role. So preparing for the future is one of the most critical leadership responsibilities of the chief executive, and working in partnership with the board of directors. The chief executive must develop a shared vision for the future of the organization, as well as build understanding around the mission and develop appropriate goals and strategies to advance the mission. The chief executive is the major champion, not only of the process and the plan. They really set the tone for planning, making sure that it's an open process, that it's a safe process, that we can share constructive criticisms and be able to constructively deal with them. I like to include a lot of confidential opportunities for people to provide input. Because really the bottom line is we want to do what's best for the organization, and we're only able to do what's best for the organization if we're able to be honest and transparent with each other. You know, transparency is the currency of trust, and if we have trust, then we can build anything together. And of course, they provide access and information. Staff, they are so critical to the process and need to be involved. You know, that saying, don't do anything about me without me. You're going to have greater buy-in if they feel like they are contributing to setting the future direction. So staff is critical. Stakeholders. So this is where, you know, getting your donors involved, getting their information. Foundation, because internal stakeholders only provide part of the picture. You know, external stakeholders, donors, etc. It helps build more honest and productive relationships with donors, and we know that relationship building is really the secret to successful fundraising. It's not really a secret, it's a well-known, but how well are we deepening those relationships? Are we involving our donors as partners in our work? And how are we doing that? And then finally, the consultant. So, you know, the choice, one of the strategic planning is all about choices, and choosing to work with a consultant to help guide can add a lot of value because they're neutral, they're objective, they bring a lot of body of knowledge to the process. They are willing to challenge assumptions and ask powerful questions, and encouraging the group to challenge the status quo and hold the group accountable for moving forward. They bring insights, a broader perspective from the sector and the field. So having the right consultant that's a good fit for you and to help guide you through the planning process can make all the difference in the success of your plan as well as implementation. So I see that we're getting a little bit close on time. 50 minutes goes by very quickly. So I'm just gonna give you, this is my process. So the first phase is data gathering and analysis. This is usually the most time-intensive part of the process, but it really answers the question, where are we now? We have to figure out where we are currently in order to figure out where we need to take the organization. And there are a lot of assessments, surveys, interviews, a lot of tools that are used during that phase. The second phase of the process is to determine direction. So the big question here is, where do we need to go, be going? Oftentimes I use a retreat setting. Both, there could be a staff retreat, but there definitely needs to be a board retreat that gets the board involved in setting the direction. And then third, goal and strategy formulation. So once we figure out our general compass, this is the direction we want to head in. These are the priorities. We're going to say yes to this. We're going to say no to these other focus areas. We need to figure out what are our goals and strategies that are going to help get us to that destination. So how are we going to get there is phase 3. So the major goals are those things that must be achieved in order for the vision to become a reality. And the strategies are the approaches the organization is going to take to accomplish its goals. So there are a lot of choices in here. You have to figure out what's going to be the right fit for you, but also what is the organization's capacity? You know, do we have the technology? Do we have the staff? Do we have the know-how to be successful? Because we want to set the organization up for success. And then finally, devil's in the details. So the operational plan, when I work with an organization to develop a strategic plan, not only do we develop the plan, but we also develop a 1-year operational plan with staff that really gets into the details. It operationalizes the priorities. We put work plans together, timelines, tasks, budget, responsibilities, all the boots on the ground of how we're going to make it happen. One of my favorite management sayings is, if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, then you don't know what you're doing. So it's important when you embark on strategic planning, really know the process and what you're going to do. So here are some examples of some of the strategic plans that I've facilitated. These are multiple page documents. Usually they're about 12 pages, lots of pictures, lots of visuals, usually a timeline with the strategic goals. And then here you see, these are 1-pagers. I've had clients that really, you know, the books are great. They're digital. We can share them with donors. We can put them on our website, but let's bottom line it into a 1-pager. And so these are just visually appealing, and it has all the important strategic information. It doesn't get into all of the hows, but it says this is what we want to focus our time and energy on in the next few years. All right, so leveraging your process and your plan to improve fundraising results. So I'm just going to put these up because we're running low on time. Is bottom line, you can improve your fundraising by stewarding donors and developing those relationships with these marketing tools. Your strategic plan is a tool that can be optimized. Not only the end document, but the process itself. How are we better engaging our donors as partners in shaping our future and informing that process, how we shape ourselves as an entity and where we're going, but also how we use our plan to communicate to donors so we're consistent in that communication, and how we're using our strategic plan to do donor stewardship, right? So we're doing stewardship calls where we're updating them on our strategic plan progress, etc. So how are we using them as a tool to tell the story of the organization, both past and present? And then I'm going to open up the chat box here and see if anybody has any questions. And as you're typing any questions that you may have, just a couple things, the strategic questions. I often will go to board meetings, facilitate board retreats, and I'll ask them, how many of you can recite the mission statement verbatim? You would be surprised at how few hands actually go up in the room. I think this is a huge missed opportunity because mission statement is really why we exist. It's the heart and soul of the organization. And many organizations don't even have vision statements. We want something to dream for, to work towards, etc. How closely aligned is your case support for your strategic plan? You know, is it aligned at all? The case for support, who is the hero of your case for support? Is it the donor? Is it the client? You know, how can you optimize your case support for accomplishing your strategic goals? Have we identified what results will hold ourselves accountable?
Minute break now. I believe everyone should be back from their breakout. So we are just going to show a brief video from the Community Foundation, our wonderful sponsor of today's Fundraisers Forum. And we will be back at